given that the importance of these two countries, the size of these economies in a rapidly growing continent, and a continent where talking about free trade has become the order of the day. We can't realize this free trade initiative without these two countries working together much more closely. And I think that as a first step, and we have to do it in a phased way, we have been engaging for many years. We're not starting from nowhere. It's really, we need some quick wins. We need to say, where can we collaborate quickly, where can we get things done and build capacity and jobs, etc., in the interests of both countries. And it was suggested we need to look back. This relationship has not always had difficulties. It's not always been in trouble. And there's a lot of examples of a past engagement that we can look to as a kind of template. What were we doing then that made things work that are not working now? And I think that a key area here is leadership. There's a sense that there's always been this adage that South Africa and Nigeria are the leaders of the continent. My personal view, and certainly what I've picked up from traveling around the continent, is that's not really the case anymore. People have lost interest. They've looked for new ways to manage the continental issues because South Africa and Nigeria just don't seem to be able to get their act together. That's certainly the feedback I have a lot. But I think that obviously that needs to change. And what we really need is strong signals from the leadership. We need to see the leadership of the two countries collaborating. We need to have they need to have a hotline to each other when there's a crisis. We need to be able to manage it at a political level in a much more, dare I say, responsible and proactive kind of way, rather than having that divide us. And that's easy to say, but I think that's where we need to, that's certainly the strong signals are needed. And also closer collaboration. We have ad hoc meetings, the Binational Commission sits once in a while. We need to have much closer engagement. We need to be seen to be doing things together. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Felucia Phillips from the Nigeria-South Africa Chamber of Commerce to just talk about, we're each going to talk about a little bit of feedback from the 4 sessions today. So Felucia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anne. And like I say, we stand on previous protocols. We had a session on transportation and power. I had responsibility for those two, to report back on those two. The first thing that I must say is that we recognize that clearly South Africa has a much greater expertise on things that have to do with the technical nature, on technology, manufacturing, maintenance, and things of that nature. And certainly South Africa has got a lot more experience, gained more years of doing this than Nigeria. And by starting off on that platform, we know that we are in a situation as Nigerians where we've got to sit down and listen and try and learn. And South Africa on its own has got to be able to say that, look, we would share with you and accept the fact that we're going to carry you along in all the things that we have to do. What dominated the conversation as far as transport was concerned was all the work that's been done by Transnet, almost like a model, and saying that Transnet's done a lot, and we shared with us that which Transnet is doing in Nigeria with GE, with APM Terminal, and even the Power China. And what was clear was that in the area of rail and ports, we certainly have a lot to learn, and there's a lot that's been taking place from what Transnet has been doing. I think what is great about it is the tremendous amount of experience that they bring to bear, and the realization that Transnet is spending a lot of money, mentioned something between the 2 to 5 billion naira on rail expansion programs, rail implementation programs, and collaboration that takes place. Transnet confirmed that they have a lot of several ports collaborative activities going on, whereby they deal with the whole value chain of the financial, getting the funding in place, getting contractors to execute, and obviously trying to bear in mind the need to have local content in all these things. The bottom line is that Transnet's model is to go out and create opportunities for South African entities in the continent. And it's a lesson for us in Nigeria to learn as well about having a very, very powerful institution that's going out there and spreading the capability that the country has across the continent, both for the benefit of South Africa, clearly, but also for the benefit of the African continent, because it's supposed to be mutually satisfying. Also, we realized that the whole concept in this transport and infrastructure area is one that comes with a whole funding model, a whole value chain, so to speak, so that it isn't just a case of, we fund and we walk away, but we fund and we execute and we take you along in the process of doing that. And in that also, we debated the issue about doing these things with government projects and issues about who owns, issues about ownership of the process, ownership of the project, and how a lot of these things still need to be sorted out. But the bottom line is that it's got to be of a mutually beneficial nature, and we have to be conscious about growing local skills, because clearly these projects in a country like Nigeria and other African countries, you want to be able to create employment and through that develop the skills of people that exist in there. We also, when we move on to the issue about power, which was the second group that I certainly worked with, we realized that Nigeria, clearly we've got a problem. We have 12,000 kilowatts in installed capacity. We struggle to generate 4,000, and yet, that's South Africa probably do 10 times more than that. So again, we know we have to learn. We know there's a lot that we've got to take away from it. But certainly what was shared in the room was the fact that Nigeria seems to have sorted out its own institutional framework for the energy, for the power sector in terms of, generation, transmission, and distribution. And there's a lot that can be learned there. But having said that, again, there are problems that we're facing in areas of tariff, pricing, and difference of opinion in how these things need to work. What will be Nigeria's strategy, and this was an open invitation to those in the power sector in South Africa, is that we want to go along the route of mini grids, whereby we have anything from your 100 kVA to whatever size, whereby you have isolated mini grids or you have mini grids that are connected to themselves to generate a much larger quantity of power. And we, at the moment, have about 300 mini grid sites, and we're ready to go up to about 10,000. And we said this is a major area of opportunity for the South African organizations who are strong in this area to participate. One point that was raised out of concern is the need to, the struggle that South African companies have in getting local partners that they can rely on, that they can trust, that they know that they can get the business going and the deal going. And again, we share the fact that this is the role that the chambers have to play in helping organizations of this nature to plow through this rather tortuous route. Again, we accept the fact that South Africa is way ahead with technology. We know that power has to be paid for, which is a problem. I think, you probably have it here also, that people, the reluctance to pay for power, and it's something we're trying to get around, and the ability to pay and the facility to pay as well. And I was talking to somebody earlier on who were trying to produce meters and move them into Nigeria. So when you look at it, there's just tremendous opportunities in all these areas where if we begin to talk to ourselves in a very, very connected way, there are things that we can do which ensures that we would make a lot of progress in these areas, certainly transport, infrastructure, and power. Okay, just one point. So that's as far as the discussions I had specifically. I just want to sort of round up generally and share with you some of the thoughts that we have. When we had our session this morning, we were warned not to talk about the past and not to dwell on all the problems that existed before, because we wanted to be very forward-looking, and we thought, well, okay, that's a good idea. But one thing that I will mention, and I think we hope from the discussions that we've heard so far, that both countries seem to have ignored each other after a while. Initially, I share with people that, I certainly have been coming here since 1992, and I know that things were going up and then sort of disappeared. So it's gladdening to know, as an old-timer here in South Africa, that both countries have decided they want to start, talk to each other and keep connected. I know also that certainly one thing that South African government has gotten right is the role of the Department of Trade and Industry in going out there and actually sharing and looking for opportunities for South Africa, which is something, some lessons that I think we in Nigeria can also learn as well. Nigeria's got a huge market. We know it. It's a wealthy country, and we know it. We know that we need to try and see how that itself can be even enlarged a lot more than what we have now. We need to move only through or principally through having strategic partnerships. and we believe that South Africa is an obvious partner, I think it makes sense as Africans to be able to work with each other than have us going to different parts of the world, in America, in Europe, in Germany, and Asia, when right there, just down south to us, there's a great partner that we can have, and all we need to do is just agree that we want to work together. And this brings me to this concept of this special relationship.
South Africa has expertise, Nigeria has huge opportunities. So this is an area where where the countries can work together. Although it did come up that people can find Nigerian food ingredients in South Africa that are imported from Latin America rather than from Nigeria. Now that seems to be an issue, and there is certainly a sense that South Africa is very closed when it comes to engagement with goods coming this way rather than our exports into the rest of Africa. I don't know whether that's true. It may be an urban legend, but I think it's certainly bears greater analysis. Also, the issue of trade bans and import bans in Nigeria came up. I mean, it seems that it's been a long time that Nigeria has been doing this, and it hasn't yielded achieve the same effect. And lastly, on the agriculture side, just to think about institutionalizing agriculture in bilateral agreements to ensure that we keep this cooperation on track in this vital area. And just quickly on last thing on the oil and gas, South Africa, I'm sure most of you here know that Nigeria is particularly strategic in the area of oil and gas for South Africa. 26% of our oil supplies come from Nigeria. So that makes it an imperative sector for us. And certainly there's, as somebody called it, billions of dollars of opportunity on the table in Nigeria in the oil and gas sector. Nigeria tends to be viewed as an oil producer, but in fact it's actually an energy-rich nation. And in fact there's huge opportunities in a very long and deep value chain from oil services right through to providing boats for the oil industry. So thank you very much, everybody.
Can I thank our two business representatives? And there was a great example. I mean, they just seamlessly move the conversation and the report between them. So it's an example of the cooperation we want to engender more widely. Some great ideas, we've taken note of those, particularly for Luso Phillips' point about the special relationship characterizing Nigeria and South Africa as a special relationship, one that we must engineer, and one in which we must celebrate our successes. Your Excellency, President Ramaphosa, we had planned to bring together 100 companies from the two countries today. That was our plan. We had a problem, a good problem to have. We were oversubscribed, and in all 188 companies, represented by about 200 business people registered for the business forum. They came this morning, they met in plenary, they had some side discussions. I'm told the business cards were being furiously exchanged between them. And we brought together, I think, a fantastic pool of entrepreneurial energy with businesses from both Nigeria and South Africa. Excellency, President Ramaphosa, you've emphasized the importance of this relationship, of investment, of trade, of tourism. Let's call it the business relationship. You emphasize the importance of taking practical actions, of getting things done. And fresh from the new mandate that you obtained in the May general elections in South Africa, you led a delegation to Niamey in Niger to, as it were, switch on the implementation phase of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Next year, President Ramaphosa will chair the African Union. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure now to invite His Excellency President Ramaphosa to address us, and I ask you to please join me in welcoming him to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's be seated, please. Program Director, Minister Patel, honorable ministers from our two respective countries, ambassadors, business leaders who are here, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm really delighted to be here, and therefore, and you have been welcomed, but I'm glad to extend a word of welcome to all of you for being here. We meet today to acknowledge and to celebrate the promise that is offered by this relationship between these two great nations. That promise in many ways is a promise also of a shared prosperity, a prosperity that our peoples yearn for, and a prosperity that they deserve. It is the promise of a united Africa, realizing its development potential and righting the injustices of our troubled past. as a people and as a continent. It is the promise of an Africa committed to openness and ready to take our place, our rightful place, I might add, as a key driver of growth as well as innovation. Remembering that this is a continent where humanity originated, so there is a lot of promise that is stored in everything that we can do. As countries of our continent, we must recognize that we will only be able to overcome the challenges that we face, as well as the challenges of the past, if we thrive as a continent. Africa can only really thrive if African businesses thrive and succeed. And that is why it gives me a great deal of pleasure and delight to be here amongst the people who are going to be driving and continue to drive Africa's progress and growth. We must recommit to a closer, stronger relationship grounded in shared prosperity and a shared development destiny. And in doing so, we must, as two countries, and indeed as the entire continent, break down the barriers that impede our progress. When we come to South Africa and Nigeria, one would say that we must meet more often, and it's good that you are meeting in the way that you are as a business forum, exchanging cards, and I would even say moving from contact to contract. And I hope as you've exchanged these cards, you already had your contract in hand. But we must also trade more, invest more, and work together more. That is what I hope South Africa and Nigeria will be able to achieve more and more. To achieve this, obviously, our continent must overcome old patterns of unbalanced and unequal growth and embrace a model of inclusive and sustainable growth. The Africa Free Trade Area agreement that Minister Patel refers to, and the broader vision of 2063 of the African Union is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to achieve this vision. The AfCFTA will realize the ambitions of the Abuja Treaty and create a unified African economy, as we all know and keep hearing of a combined GDP of more than $2 trillion. The short-term value unlocked by the Continental Free Trade Agreement will be immense. It will be huge. But it is the prospects for future growth that are truly remarkable. By 2050, population of our continent will be around 2.5 billion people. The next generation will be more urbanized, better educated, and many more people will be wealthier than any that has come before. By 2040, the urban population of our continent will be larger than that of China and India, and 4 times larger than that of the United States. And these are just visions that we must begin to have as we grow the economy of our continent. While the global economy slows, Africa is emerging as the next growth market in the world. To realize the opportunity of our demographic dividend, we will need to rapidly expand and diversify our industrial capacity, and in many ways go beyond just talking about the dream of industrialization and begin to do it in real effect. We must become leading producers in the types of consumer products a growing middle class demands, and in the complex industrial products that are needed for core industries like mining, construction, agriculture, and infrastructure. The development of regional value chains that allow for specialization while fairly sharing the benefits of growth will allow our economies to grow as populations do. Meeting the challenge of a population boom and rapid economic growth will require an infrastructure revolution. The African Development Bank estimates that Africa needs to spend between $130 billion and $170 billion a year to meet our infrastructure needs. That spending will connect the continent through new roads, rail, port infrastructure, and crucially, through broadband. This infrastructure development will strengthen the business environment, but will itself unlock a number of growth opportunities for African manufacturers, construction companies, and services firms. We used to have a colonialist who was called Cecil John Rhodes, who kept dreaming about building a rail line from Cape Town to Cairo. I've heard President al-Sisi of Egypt talking about the same. And I've also expressed my own dream, which is also having this same rail line from Cape Town right through to Cairo. And I once said to him, if you start building it and connect with all the other leaders, we will meet you somewhere along the way. He got really excited about that. So we will yet realize the dream of an infrastructure build on our continent so that we can unleash the energy and the power of our continent. And realizing these opportunities will require removing blockages to local participation in regional mega projects, and there are many of those. Recent history tells us that if only a few large countries benefit from integration, the long-term prospects for sustainable integration are truly dim. We must ensure that all African states on our continent, big and small, do indeed benefit from this great promise that this Africa Free Trade Area Agreement holds out. This will be achieved by allowing flexibility in the implementation of the agreement by smaller countries and by developing a regional industrial vision that recognizes each country's unique capabilities and fairly shares production. As the two largest economies on the continent, and as the industrial linchpins in our respective regions, Nigeria and South Africa have a unique role to play in driving integration. Our existing regional value chains can be integrated by developing and deepening our bilateral relations. These efforts build on a strong base. Over 100 South African companies have made investments in Nigeria. Last year, over 1,700 South African firms had active trade relations with Nigeria. South Africa is by far the largest purchaser of Nigerian products in Africa, accounting for nearly half of Nigeria's exports to the rest of our continent in 2018. The depth of this trade and investment relationship does make Nigeria a key partner for South Africa and is a clear sign of our commitment to support President Buhari's economic recovery and growth plan. We therefore need to transform our trade relations to be one of greater value addition, with a greater focus on manufactured and agro-processed goods. Crude oil still dominates trade between our two countries, as we had, despite our sophisticated consumer markets and capable manufacturing sector. As the two governments, we are committed to create the conditions that will make it easier for South African companies to operate in Nigeria. And we also want to make it a lot easier as well for Nigerian companies to operate in our market here. So the two governments are committed to achieving that. This was singled out in a very focused way during our discussions this morning. We are aware of the challenges that sometimes arise in our respective countries and have agreed to put in place necessary mechanisms to address these. To the South African firms that are here today, I urge you to reach out to your Nigerian partners as you search for suppliers, for partners and new markets for your products. Our two countries have been working together on the establishment of the Sub-Saharan Automotive Development Plan. The plan recognizes the important role the automotive sector can play in promoting industrial development and aims to align our respective initiatives for maximum benefit. And the initiative itself will be important not just to the automotive sector, but as a testing ground for a deeply collaborative approach for industrial development. Both South Africa and Nigeria need to upgrade their electricity generation capacity by expanding grid capacity and shifting to more sustainable sources of energy. Nigeria faces a challenge in this regard, and much as we may all believe that South Africa, with its installed capacity, is at a high level, we are facing our own challenges as we speak, but we are determined to address these, and we will be addressing them in a determined way in the coming weeks. In meeting this challenge, South African and Nigerian firms need to collaborate in the production of key components and work jointly on major development projects. And building this capacity will meet a pressing need for the business community, while also positioning our countries to take advantage of new opportunities in a rapidly evolving energy market. The potential on offer through such partnerships is demonstrated by Transnet's role in Nigeria's narrow gauge rail project. The project aims to improve narrow gauge railway services in Nigeria and provide efficient and reliable transport services. Transnet has agreed to manufacture, to supply and maintain 200 wagons and refurbish and supply 10 locomotives for the first phase of the interim solution. Now, the vision of African integration is closer than I believe it has ever been. Our forebears who established the OAU, many of them who have come and gone, will be pleased and possibly smiling where they are to have seen the continent deal with a matter that many people thought was going to be virtually impossible to deal with, to have had a landmark achievement of signing up of the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement. And it carries with it the promise that is going to be able to catapult our continent to higher levels of growth. Engagements where companies come together, find common ground, and capitalize on the many shared opportunities that we are here can offer and begin to come alive. And Ms. Games, let me possibly touch on some of the issues that you touched on in responding to the question that you posed. How should we characterize the relationship between South Africa and Nigeria? Is it a special relationship or is it a strategic relationship? Now, you'll be pleased to hear that we see it as a strategic relationship. Strategic means much more than special. In the dictionary, you can go and check tonight. Strategic because at government level, we've elevated our dealings with each other to the level of heads of state in the form of the Binational Commission, which used to be at vice or deputy president level. It's now been elevated. It means it's been promoted. It means it's been heightened to a much higher level. But what are the key elements of this this strategic relationship? It certainly means that there is much more than a hotline between the two presidents. We are able, as issues come up, we are able to pick up the phone and talk to one another and deal with issues, some of those being very difficult issues, such as the recent acts of violence that occurred in both countries, where in our own country, in South Africa, a number of foreign nationals found themselves under attack, and violence was unleashed against them and their establishments and businesses. And in retaliation, South African establishments, businesses, and even people were also attacked. That certainly means that you need a special relationship, a very rather strategic relationship, to be able to deal with that, and a hotline then comes into play. President Buhari and I were able to discuss these, but we were able to discuss it wearing our cool heads in a very cool-headed manner. We were able to reflect on what has happened and agreed that yes, in both countries we do need to ensure that the rule of law does apply, that we bring these acts of violence to an end. And I want to applaud the government of Nigeria for having taken swift action in Nigeria and stopped the attacks that were being perpetrated against South African businesses and establishments. In our own country, they spread out in a much bigger area, and we did, in the end, arrest well over 300 people, and many of those will be facing their trials soon. But we've also agreed that this strategic relationship should mean that we set up structures. We set up various structures, including an early warning system. An early warning system that will inform both governments and immediately also go up to the top about threats that we may be seeing. But all these must also deal with issues that may impact on our very good economic and trade relations. And this is a relationship that will deepen as we move on. The leadership, Ms. Games, that you yearn for on the continent cannot be imposed by any of our two countries. It is a leadership that has to be earned. It cannot be a leadership that is based on arrogance by any of our two countries, but must be based on how we respect others, other nations, and try to show leadership in the way we do things. The entire continent is particularly interested in how South Africa and Nigeria relate to one another, and how the leadership of the two countries relate to one another, not only at presidential level, but also at government levels, at ministers' levels. This visit has reinforced the need precisely for that. And we have committed ourselves as we move on to deepen the relationship between the two countries, that we will be relating with each other at closer range and giving full effect to the relationship which we characterize as a strategic relationship. Following this visit, we will begin to see meaningful changes between our two countries. We will see two countries that are not afraid to deal with challenges and problems, including the recent challenges and problems that we have had. But we want to broaden this. We want to broaden this and have a relationship that will also be beneficial to yourselves as business people, where if there are challenges and if there are barriers that impede the growth of your companies, the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa should be the type of relationship that will enable us to help you to grow your companies. So the two countries are open for business. We're open for business, and we will be dealing with practical issues. Practical issues, and I had the complaint earlier. The complaint earlier was about visas. We will be addressing the issue of visas, and we will try to untangle all that. I'll be spending tomorrow at our Home Affairs Ministry, where they deal with visas. And I'll be saying that we want to facilitate the granting of visas to our compatriots on the African continent, so that we open the two countries for business. And I know that many of you want business visas to be able to come here to conduct business, and we will be dealing with all that. So what I wanted to communicate is that the strategic nature of the relationship is going to be such that we will be able to deal with problems in a very proactive manner. And in some cases, we will also, through our early warning system, be able to decipher and to glean where there are going to be hitches and blockages and be able to address that. So this is what this visit, the state visit that President Buhari has paid to us in South Africa, is going to yield. And therefore, the relations between South Africa and Nigeria are going to be much stronger, and this visit has actually made that possible. And I hope that yourselves as business people, you will be able to take heed from the way that the two countries will now be relating to each other, because our relationship is set to take off. And I hope that your own businesses will indeed take off and reach higher levels of profitability, so that you can pay the taxes that we need to usher in development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for those thoughtful remarks. I must tell you, when you started to talk about creating an environment of increased profitability so taxes could be paid, it was a wonderful moment to see everybody happy. It is now my pleasure to invite my colleague and sister, Honorable Mariam Katagun, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who will deliver remarks on behalf of His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari. And please welcome her to the podium.
Thank you very much. To start with, my sincere apologies for arriving late. It's not in my nature to come late to any event. And secondly, to extend the sincere apologies of President Buhari for his inability to be here this afternoon. I think before I present his remarks, I would like to thank Diana and Folusho for the feedback I'm glad I came in time to listen to their feedback. So the statement from President Muhammadu Buhari. Your Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, Your Excellencies, the Governors of Ebonyi, Kano, and Plateau States, Your Excellency, Honorable Ministers, Captains of Industry, Gentlemen of the Press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I wish to thank the government and people of South Africa for the warm hospitality extended to my delegation since our arrival in this beautiful Gauteng province. Let me also offer my sincere thanks to His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa for his kind invitation. I would like to use this opportunity to specially commend Your Excellency, Mr. President, for ensuring that this event is happening regardless of the prevailing circumstances. Indeed, we have covered a lot of grounds together, and I'm happy to note that we have made a lot of progress in the wide range of shared challenges across sectors in our bilateral engagement. As far back as November 2009, when South Africa hosted the South Africa-Nigeria Binational Commission in Pretoria, which led to the listing of Owando, a Nigerian energy conglomerate, on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, there's been a lot of bilateral businesses thriving, especially in the private sector. One of such that is worthy of mention is the Dangote Group, that has invested hugely in the South African cement industry. Equally is the way and manner the Nigeria-South Africa Chamber of Commerce has improved and facilitated the bilateral trade relationships between both countries. This can be seen in the close to 320 number of companies currently trading between Nigeria and South Africa. Your Excellency, Nigeria and South Africa share the same vision that through partnership, a prosperous South Africa, as well as a prosperous Nigeria, will mean greater prosperity for the rest of Africa. However, we appreciate the fact that there are no quick fixes to the complex challenges facing us. Although daunting, these challenges are not insurmountable. At this juncture, let me recall the commitment the two countries made at the last Nigeria-South Africa Business Forum, held in Abuja on 9th March 2016, during the state visit of His Excellency, former President Jacob Zuma, where we agreed to work together to uplift our two countries through adopting measures and reforms that will enhance the industrialization process in Africa. I'm particularly delighted to note that the pledge made in 2016 by our two countries to upgrade the Binational Commission to the present level of discussion has finally come to fruition. As a result, our expectation is that this business forum will also consolidate on the gains of our previous commitments. From our side, the principal thrust of our government is to consolidate on the achievements of the last 4 years, correct the inevitable lapses in all human endeavors, and tackle the new challenges our country faces. On this note, it is the desire of my government to chart a bold plan for transforming Nigeria. It is also important to highlight the fact that Nigeria has improved on its trade and investment regimes and would want to encourage South Africa to reciprocate by granting market access opportunities to Nigeria's exportable products and services. To underscore this fact, the World Bank Doing Business team has just announced Nigeria as one of the top 20 improvers in doing business out of 190 countries. The World Bank's latest announcement acknowledges the reforms spearheaded by the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, PEBEC, in the areas of operationalizing new electronic platforms that integrates the tax authority and our Corporate Affairs Commission. It further acknowledges reforms carried out in some of the World Bank doing business indicator areas, such as starting a business, registering property, getting construction permits, getting electricity, enforcing contracts, and trading across borders. This validation confirms that our strategy is working and will continue to push even harder. These improvements in the standing of Nigeria as a result of the reform agenda being implemented at national and subnational levels across our country since the establishment of the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council in July 2016. This council works towards the fulfillment of the projections of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan 2017 to 2020, which is a major policy tool that is striving to deliver sustainable economic growth in Nigeria by restoring growth, investing in our people, and building a competitive economy. Furthermore, with the impending ratification of the Companies and Allied Matters Bill and the introduction of the Business Facilitation Omnibus Bill of 2019, along with other outstanding regulatory, judicial, and subnational reforms, Nigeria is poised to meet its goal of being a top 100 ranked economy by 2020. I must also mention, Your Excellency, our diplomatic relations, which is and has remained strong. South Africa is considered as one of Nigeria's most strategic partners on the African continent. Over the years, we have called for greater international burden sharing in peacekeeping missions, campaigns for the annulment of Africa's external debts, championed better market access for African exportable products and services into the global economy in fairer terms. Let me emphasize on a day-to-day basis and at every level of our governments that we'll continue to work hard at building a positive, cooperative, and comprehensive relationship that our citizens will benefit from in a sustainable manner. Mr. President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, the core objectives of the present administration under my leadership are to improve security, achieve a diversified, inclusive economic growth, and fight corruption. Crucially, we believe in a strong partnership with the private sector in our various initiatives to restore investment flows and improve the ease of doing business. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the entrepreneurs and investors in the critical sectors of the economy. Our economy is dependent on the strength of your investments and productivity. We will be responsive to your needs and ideas, not just about how we can attract more investment, but how your ideas can help create a more inclusive and equitable economy. There is no better time to invest in Nigeria than now. Nigeria is currently reviewing laws affecting investment in the country with a view to ensuring that the right laws for investors are put in place. I will conclude by reaffirming Nigeria's commitment to the goals and aspirations embedded in our joint Nigeria-South Africa Binational Commission. Let me also reiterate Nigeria's commitment to the strengthening of our partnership and cooperation to the mutual benefit of our beloved countries. Let me thank our South African brothers for hosting us and for working tirelessly with us as we move forward to the next level in our journey together into a bright and promising future in a win-win partnership. I see South Africa and Nigeria as countries of tremendous potentials in the continent of Africa, where the winds of hope and expectations are blowing ever stronger. More importantly, with the opportunities that will be created by the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. This will open vast opportunities for trade and investments for both countries. However, realizing the potentials of the AFCFTA will require investment in regional infrastructure to connect our respective countries. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, going by the caliber of personalities gathered here today, I'm convinced that this event has provided an exceptional opportunity for our business communities to hold a robust dialogue on trade and investment potentials in our two countries. I'm therefore optimistic that our gathering here has contributed to a better and deeper understanding of our political and economic landscapes and will further strengthen the existing cordial relationship between our two countries. God bless the Republic of South Africa. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I thank you for your kind attention. End of statement.
To my colleague, Minister Katagun, thank you very much for that. And please convey to President Buhari our sincere appreciation for His Excellency's remarks. You would have seen a strong alignment of messages by the two heads of state. You would have seen a deep optimism about this relationship, the strategic nature of this relationship, and the way in which both heads of state says, let's get down to work and deepen this relationship. As we begin to conclude, I want to share one figure. Africa imports about 8 trillion rands worth of goods from the rest of the world. Only 1 trillion of that is imported from fellow African countries. That leaves an opportunity of some 7 trillion rands worth of imports, which our industrialization can have as its target. 7 trillion rand. That is bigger than the entire South African GDP. Every good, every service, whether it's produced by a small hairdresser or large mining company, all of that aggregated does not come equal to the amount of goods that Africa buys from the rest of the world and not from itself. And it reminds us of that rallying call by political leaders and thinkers that says Africa produces what it does not consume, and Africa consumes what it does not produce. And this bilateral relationship can begin to change that. And I want to end off with noting the words of a famous Nigerian, Wole Soyinka, who said, "A tiger doesn't proclaim its tigritude, he pounces." And that's what we are asking the business community to do. Let's not assert how important this relationship is. Let's do it. A special thank you to Minister Naledi Pandor from South Africa, who was really mobilized and rallied all of us so strongly to take the challenges that we had some weeks ago and turn it into this enormous opportunity under the leadership from the South African side of President Ramaphosa and from the Nigerian side of President Buhari. I'd like now for us all to allow the President to take leave of absence, to thank you very much for what you've contributed, to say, in the words of the President, turn the contacts into contracts, and let's get the business flowing between our two great countries. So, Mr. President, thank you for having come here, and we look forward to making this work so that the next business forum between South Africa and Nigeria will be one where we celebrate the contracts that have now been concluded and implemented. So thank you very much, and may I ask all of us just to stand as we take leave of the President and our colleague. And that then, I think, brings us to the happy place where we can say we've worked hard today. We worked hard at the Binational Commission. We've got a new Ministerial Advisory Council that will mean twice a year we'll be making sure that things happen. We've got a whole set of agreements that we've concluded about industrial cooperation, all sorts of things. And I wish you luck in your business, and I thank you for having participated today. Thank you very much. And the business forum is declared closed. Thank you.